Hello and welcome back to Open Door Philanthropy Giving Advisors. We are interviewing yet another philanthropy consultant. His name is Marshall Ginn. Did I pronounce Ginn correctly?
You absolutely did. Well done.
Terrific. It's like a kind of like a GIF situation. And I like to go with the hard G.
It's very well done. It's only 4 letters, and you would be surprised what people will do to just 4 letters. So I'm sensitive to. I always ask, and I speak to other people, if I think there's any issue with their last name, I absolutely say, let me get this last name correct. So I've been there. So, but thank you.
I work globally these days. And so I hardly ever get anyone's name right. This is a very new experience for me.
Well done, then.
Yeah. It is nice to meet you. Fans of the podcast will know that I like to dive right into my guests. We're going to start with your childhood. What was that like?
I am probably about as WASP as it gets. I will just put it right out there.
You spell out the I say WASP.
Yes, WASP. So white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. So
yes.
I am from Richmond, Virginia. Grew up my entire life there. I went to the same school from kindergarten through my senior year of high school. My parents were married the entire time I grew up. They had known each other, but my mom passed away about 20 some years ago. But my parents had been married for 40 years and had known each other for 50 years. I essentially grew up in the same house since I was 4 years old. So, a very, very, very traditional, Richmond, growing up in Richmond kind of background.
What did the folks do?
My father had a variety of jobs, but the biggest of which was he worked for my mother's family's business. So my mother came from a large Richmond family that owned a rug cleaning business. And we did carpet sales and rug cleaning. We went into people's homes. I, as a teenager, like all the members of the family, spent time working in that. So I learned how to clean carpets, learned how to go into someone's living room and pick up all the furniture, take a rug and put it in the truck and put other furniture back down, all that kind of stuff.
Do my hardwood floors offend you?
I know. I love hardwood floors. It drives me. I mean, I have rugs because we just collect them over time. But my dad, I think, what was he? He's like vice president for advertising and marketing for that. But my mother's father and my mother's uncle started this business, and so that was where it all came from. My mom was basically. Stay-at-home mom is really not quite the right way to describe it. My mom was a very, very active community volunteer. I mean, both my parents were very, very involved civically. My mother was president of the Junior League. My mother was president of the Richmond Historic Foundation.
The Junior League of Richmond.
Richmond, yes. Yep. Exactly.
The president of the Junior League, and then there's the Junior League of Richmond.
It was Junior League of Richmond.
That sounds southern to me.
I'm sorry?
That sounds very southern to me.
Oh, very, very. Although I will say, and it was mildly controversial that my mom, when she became president of the Junior League of Richmond, she had not actually formally made her debut in that, when they used to call it coming out, which is now me.
There's a lot to unpack. We're gonna pause for a moment. For our audience that may not be familiar with the debutante scene or Junior League or Richmond and all that, can you give us like a short explanation of how you grew up a boy in Richmond? For girls growing up, we don't do this stuff in Maine, but I went to boarding school and met some people who went through this stuff. Can you tell me a little bit about, and you've got a personal experience here with your mother becoming, did you say, so she became president of the Junior League before?
She did not make her debut. And so it was evidently mildly controversial that, it wasn't like my mom wasn't from a well-known family. She just didn't go through because my grandfather basically said, would you like to come out or would you like to go to Europe for the summer? Well,
she didn't do this stuff.
No, she did not do the whole coming out thing,
can you tell me a little bit about what it is?
It's basically like a presentation of young women to society when they get to, I don't know, can't remember what the age is, but essentially it's like, ta-da, and here's our daughter. Guys don't do that. I mean, that's certainly not a thing that I
David
just
and
want.
I, David and I are Jewish, and we have a sort of a
Well,
version.
yes, yeah. So, but
For us, we actually, like, historically, I know there's a bat mitzvah ceremony now, but that's actually very new. This is mostly because it's like, and this is my personal belief on it. It's harder to turn boys into men than it is girls into women, and we need like special ceremony and study and attention paid in order to get it done correctly. And also, when we fail to do it right, it's disastrous and very dangerous.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, no,
It's not particularly. It doesn't. She doesn't become a like killing machine.
no. It was a blip on the radar, but no, my mom was.
And she didn't do it. She went to Europe instead, where I'm sure she learned more than she would have.
Oh, absolutely. My mother was.
It always seems to me with these things, again, as an outsider, and the understanding of the coming out thing, is there the subtle implication that, like, before this you should not look at the woman sexually, and after this it's now okay to look at her sexually?
I don't remember enough and have enough context to answer. I mean, it's an interesting way to look at it. I mean,
This language, it's all about like presenting,
is presenting so that this
out,
I think all the
being
older
shown sometimes.
yeah, I mean, and here she's now can be, she's someone that your son could think about courting and marrying one day or something like that. I think it's kind
Sorry
of
to talk
like,
about looking at your mom sexually.
yeah, no, and it's sorry, that was not the
Courting, or this is now an official. You can think about her romantically.
I mean, it's all it is interesting. I will be perfectly honest. I will turn 60 in about a month. And
Congratulations.
so I did a lot of my growing up, in this time where, it's all about sort of, how do young men and young women socialize properly? I mean, I went to this thing called cotillion, where
Sure.
you went and learned how to do the foxtrot dance, and and I hear the girls and hear the boys. They all have to figure out how to talk to each other and nice to meet you kind
Up
of.
here we square dance.
Yeah, so we did not square dance. This was very formal, wear your nice, oh God, I guess I wore coat and tie, I guess.
Square dance is pretty formal as well.
Yes, but formal as in dress up, as in
And they're both
ballroom
equally
dancing.
anti-Semitic events.
So,
There's
but
one
yeah,
thing they have in common.
so I grew up in kind of that, I mean, it's very, and and the school that I mentioned that I went to was an all male Episcopal school that I again went from kindergarten all through 12th grade. And we had a sister school that was about 5, 6 blocks away, that basically everyone, all the girls in my neighborhood friend, circles, they were all at St. Catherine's and I was at St. Christopher's, and you all kind of.
I was gonna try to guess the name of the school just based on it being an Episcopal school.
Yeah,
I
so
guess
it's
it's going to be St. Mark's.
yeah, no, it's that's a different school. So it was St. Christopher's and St. Catherine.
Yeah.
And,
I
and
like
right,
Episcopalians. Are you an Episcopalian?
very much so, very much so, and I'm still very active in the church on a very, very regular basis. So
We have a St. Mark's here in Waterville, and I am Jewish, but many of my friends were Episcopalian. And in fact, when I was a kid, they had a Dungeons and Dragons game on Sunday nights. So I used to go to Episcopal church every Sunday.
Oh, there you go. Well done.
My friends
You've
were
done good.
in the choir. I used to sing and act a little bit, and I used to go sometimes and watch the singing there. And I will say, some of the worst singing I've ever heard.
Interestingly enough, I sang also in school, and I didn't sing at our right smack dab in the middle between St. Christopher's School and St. Catherine's School is St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, my home parish, which Tom Wolfe, the author who went to St. Christopher's School, he actually referred to St. Stephen's as St. Convenience, because it is in fact where all the St. Christopher's boys and St. Christopher's schools got married, and then they went around the corner to the Country Club of Virginia for the reception. I mean, that was there's my growing up, sort of right there.
You went to the same school as Tom Wolfe?
Yes. Yep.
Very cool.
And
I've read
it,
most of his books.
so it was so it was anyway, it's very it was but it was a lovely upbringing. It was very stable. And of the there were 70 guys in my graduating class. 35 of us had been there for all 13 years. So, which again also kind of speaks to the, I guess, stability or the consistency of my who I was surrounded with,
What did
basically.
most of them go off? Those 70 dudes.
Um,
What did they go
we
off to?
very diverse. I mean, a great way that illustrates it. We were a little bit more diverse, but so when we graduated, 7 of us went to UVA, me being one of them. But we had people went to Harvard and Stanford and WNL and I mean all over the place. The class after us, who was also 70 guys, about 30 of them all went to UVA. So that was so we were a little bit more diverse than most of the classes that came out of St. Christopher's because we were a little UVA factory. I mean, between UVA and Washington Lee, and then Hampton Sydney because it was
All
only.
everyone going to college though. No one going to.
Yes, I mean, yes, I definitely grew up in the expectation was, and the reality was that everyone went to college. It's I don't assume that anymore, and college I think is important, but it is not the only path by any means. But yes, so college was the expectation, and off to UVA I went. So
UVA, good school.
I loved it. Wahoo, we're playing NC State tonight in the semifinals of the ACC tournament today. So go Hoos! But yeah, no, UVA was a great school, especially since I ended up majoring in architectural history. So I was surrounded by some of the most beautiful architecture, all the stuff that Mr. Jefferson had designed and built, in the early 19th century. So it was I enjoyed it. So it was a fun, interesting 4 years. So
Tell me a little. I don't think I know too much about the philanthropy uh, involved with UVA. I know Thomas Jefferson designed the campus. I'm generally aware of that.
yes, I mean it is.
Did he also pay? Like, did he put Mike? I went to Dickinson, and Dickinson
Oh,
and
okay.
Jefferson knew each other, signed some of the same documents, and actually so I know a little bit. Dickinson was very bad at teaching us about this while we were there, but my father's a historian,
Oh, okay.
and I do know it. And also Benjamin Rush was the guy who paid to build Dickinson College, and
Got
also
it.
wrote
It's
money
interesting.
for
I'm
UPenn as
trying to
well.
think.
But
I don't know, Dave.
these gentlemen didn't have the noblest of intentions. They used the term educated aristocracy. They were very worried about poor folks using democracy to make their lives better.
Yeah, I really, honestly, I actually don't know. I mean, I know Mr. Jefferson designed the school in general and sort of the practice, as well as the academical village, that sort of the part of Central Grounds. But but I honestly I don't know where the money came from to pay for the creation of it.
It is a
It
state.
was
So
it is a state school.
they've signed the declaration, got really nervous about democracy, and went and said, "All right," but also there's some good reasons as well, right? We should. It's a new nation. If we're going to have democracy, we should make sure that we can educate as much of the public as possible. If we're giving them if we're signing good intentions to them, the problem is the places became very elite institutions that you had to be rich to get into. But UVA became a state school, right? Isn't it?
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
James Madison University and Dickinson and some of the other ones. Harvard predates all this stuff by
Yep.
a lot.
Yep.
But
Yeah, UVA founded in 1817. So
Dickinson was founded in July of
1819, or what am I reading?
1876.
1819, yeah. Yeah, it's not, you don't have to be rich to go there. You just have to be really, really smart now. I mean, I'm glad I'm
As a
not.
Virginia resident, extremely affordable, right? For the quality of it.
Yes, if I remember correctly. I mean, now I will I will admit and confess it. I didn't actually pay for college. My grandfather, who had passed away when I was very young, had set up a trust, so my
Sure.
college was covered. So I don't really have a concept of that. So which I probably ought to have, but I
Fair enough.
don't.
In general, I think most they don't like want. I don't think they want like, the students to really understand how the whole thing's being paid for.
Yeah, no, it's like hospitals. The
It
finances
I
are a
have
mystery.
bad memory. Dickinson lied to us about like lots. I got my 20th reading coming up, and I'm gonna go there and we'll see how that goes. None of the people who lied to me are still working there. So
Oh, okay, there you go.
no, but
Yeah,
they
I'm glad I'm not
tell
trying to
us
get
that
into
like so we
UVA
were paying at the time the highest tuition in the country. I think it might still be, but at the time it was
now.
literally the highest. But they were telling us as well that the actual cost was higher. That we owed like we should be grateful to like all the donors and other
Oh,
folks who were giving.
I will say, I mean, I worked at Georgetown University for a while, a long time ago, but I mean, it is not inexpensive. I
You
don't care
worked at
whether
Georgia.
I'm sorry.
You were yeah. It's definitely
Yeah.
expensive to educate folks. I think it's inappropriate to try to guilt 18-year-old students into thinking they owe wealthy people
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
because
Yeah.
they made donations. You're right. I understand. My parents are college professors. I grew up on the campus of Colby College, and I understand that it's very
Oh, that's
expensive
right. I remember
to
you
run
had
these
to call me.
places. But I think the way we present how it's all happening to the recipients of the services is not like and they end up graduating from college with a unclear understanding of how philanthropy works. And
Mhm.
we just had a really great opportunity to give them firsthand experience in how it does work. And I think most campuses. So I use whenever I mean, especially I don't know that we've interviewed a Cavalier before. Is that right?
That's right. We're the
Uh,
Cavaliers.
good. I wasn't sure if it was. I think I wasn't sure about Cavalier or Mountaineer.
Yeah,
So I'm
no,
trying to.
that's not Mountaineers, West Virginia, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're the Cavaliers.
Um, but my general understanding, I think that you've got right. There was an amount paid from your trust, and then there's also an amount paid from tax dollars from the citizens of Virginia,
Uh,
and also an amount paid by donors from alumni and possibly even foundations and everything. And that's how almost all school like well, some schools get government funding, some don't. That's the big factor there. But most places, your tuition is being covered by both what you pay,
yeah,
which combination of scholarships or just straight payments or
yep,
whatever.
yep, and or
It's
financial
an
aid.
arrangement between Colby and Dickinson where the students of professors can just go to each other's colleges. But most of the kids, when I went to Dickinson, were just their parents were paying full price.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, being told, well, actually, the full price was higher. You're going to have to donate after you graduate.
Yes, and I think the ones that do it well don't say you have to. I like.
Well, they present it's a good fundraising department. They spend a really long time on the letters and stuff. I just think it's a shocking lack of candor. And and I think the kids are old enough to handle it if we could explain it better. And I also I've noticed, and I think one, you went there a while ago, so you're forgiven for not like knowing off the top of your head
Yes,
all
this was a long time
the
ago,
details.
and UVA is at some levels the same from what I can tell, and other levels it's very different. It's a lot harder to get into now. I mean, I had good grades, I had a good, class ranking, blah blah, all that good stuff. I'm if I, they're like 20 some thousand young people who apply to get into about the 2,500 spots in UVA every year now, and it wasn't those kind of numbers. At least I don't remember. But yeah, I don't have nearly the academic whatever to get into, to try to get back at UVA if I were
You
doing it
wouldn't
right
get it?
now.
You think you
Hmm?
wouldn't get
I don't think I would. Like I said, I had decent grades, but I didn't have like some, crystal clear, 4.0 and some extraordinary SAT score, blah blah. Because I went back, back to the days when SATs really meant something. But so yeah, it's a very sort of different ball game now.
when did you learn about like philanthropically funded organizations?
Um, I was about a year out of college, and I was actually looking for a job in arts administration because I was in all the singing groups at UVA. I had helped manage tours with them. And so I thought, oh, arts administration, this might be a good job. And so I was just applying for arts jobs here in Washington, D.C. I moved to D.C. right up from as soon as I graduated. And I happened to get a job at the Levine School of Music here in Washington, D.C., as a development assistant. I was just looking for some random job to help in an arts
I was
organization.
once a development assistant.
I think all of us who get into this field at one point
Yeah,
were
many folks listening. What did you do as a wait, you were a development assistant at the Levine School?
music. Yep. And I basically helped manage their annual fund.
Okay.
I from creating materials, doing newsletters to, promote, donors. There was a director of development and then an executive director that
You were
I
helping
started with.
fill that gap between tuition and the actual costs that we were talking about.
And yes, and very much so. I mean, a community music school, because again, it was, you wanted all students to be, able to take music lessons, and they also did adults. So it was
A music school that only charges full tuition is going to have, like, the students aren't going to be very good musicians, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, probably not. But anyway, yeah, so I had no idea that there was this anything called anything, fundraising and development, none of that. And that's where I started learning. Oh,
that was all like until you got the job of development assistant. This is all, and you had gone to. So your mother was president of a philanthropic organization.
I knew more about volunteering.
Church has lots of philanthropy and donors. And
oh
stuff.
Yeah. No.
You had all this day to day, basically day to day contact with philanthropy organizations.
I didn't have a name for it. I didn't sort of understand that was what was going on. I mean, as someone had said, people are making contributions, I guess I would have said, oh, sure. But it really was more the community involvement. I mean, I did, I volunteered. I mean, I was a Boy Scout. It was when I growing up. And so
another philanthropy organization.
Yeah. I mean, and so the world of sort of nonprofits and community support and being active in the community was surrounded me. And it definitely instilled in me an ethic that it's important to give back and do stuff in the community. I mean, both my parents were very, very active volunteer leaders. And so that was a no-brainer that whenever I had the opportunity to volunteer, certainly as an adult, to get involved with stuff, I'm like, yeah, no, this is important stuff. Where, giving back your time or your resources, but did I have a real full concept of it in the way I think of it now? I'm trying to think back when I was growing up. No, I don't think I had the words, we were a stable middle-class family, but it wasn't like I didn't grow up with, like, wealth flying everywhere and family foundation. So those kind of that wasn't even a terminology. I know my parents gave money to stuff, and I guess in addition to being volunteers, and they ran fundraising events. I mean, my mom was chair of this gala and that gala, and
but it was it's very interesting to me, and I've heard it from other folks who ended up working in philanthropy, that they weren't really thinking about that as a career when they were growing up. So my next question is, what were you like when you were growing up and people asked you, what did you want to be? You wanted to be in the art, you wanted to sing, being in the arts?
When I was in high school, I'm not even sure I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. I mean, I'm honest. And when I got in,
about when people asked,
when I got into UVA, I was the classic. Oh, I think I want to major in business. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And in the middle of my first year, and explain. UVA does not say freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. We say first year, second year, third year, fourth year. That was something Mr. Jefferson did. And we also call it the grounds. We don't call it a campus. So if you hear me say grounds, that's what I mean. Anyway, during my first year, I said, okay, I don't want to major in business. Let me figure out what the heck I want to do. And for some reason, I guess because I was surrounded by UVA's pretty architecture, I said, I think I'll go major in architecture. And there's a big architecture school, and my dad had studied architecture, and so I knew was a career, and so I transferred into the School of Architecture at UVA, and started down that direction, and then got about halfway through that and said, "Wow, this is an awful lot of work," and shifted from the architectural design division to architectural history. So which basically means I have a really fancy liberal arts degree that's got a really long name. That's Bachelor of Architectural History. I still had no idea what I was going to do with that. I mean, that didn't really form my concept of like what I was going to do for work. My work with the two singing groups, the Men's Glee Club and the University Singers at UVA, those are what actually gave me the ideas of, tour manager, working on events. I chaired one of our little, holiday event for the university singers that required gathering of volunteers. It was basically chairing a conference, essentially what it was. So that was all informing what ultimately I ended up doing. And I didn't even realize it was doing it, but that's what informed
Mhm.
when I got out. I wasn't saying, "Oh my God, I have to go find a corporate job." That wasn't in my, that wasn't my driving. I was like, okay, I want to go do something. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And for about a year, I had random jobs out of college. I worked at a hotel in their front office. I worked at a bookstore, and then I stumbled across this, job at the Levine School of Music, and then ever since then, it was 1987. Yes, 1987. Ever since then, all of my jobs have been connected to philanthropy, fundraising, the nonprofit sector, the whole time. So that
You got
ever
the
since then.
development assistant job, didn't look back.
Yeah, and I discovered, oh, this is very interesting. The arts fundraising, arts philanthropy. This is really interesting. I was there for about 2 years, and then went from there to a national arts organization and was a grant writer. It was the we used to be called the American Symphony Orchestra League, and I did grant writing for them for 2 years. So I stayed in the arts for the first 4 or so years of my career in fundraising. So.
Do you sing or what's
I
and
did. I don't any longer. I sang. Like I said, I sang in
people have anything
college.
prepared for us?
No, I sing in church with him singing, but I did sing though for a while when I was younger. I sang in the Washington Bach consort. I sang in the Cathedral Choral Society at the National Cathedral, and then I also sang in the chorus of the Washington Opera for a number of seasons. I did Washington Concert Opera. So there was a chunk of time up until like the early 90s where I was singing a lot.
Hmm.
And I sang in my parish's choir for a number of years. But I don't sing anymore. I love listening to music, and but that was a fundraising and philanthropy really became my career. Singing was a hobby, and it had to sort of take it back. So I'm just now a patron of and appreciator of the arts. I don't do any performing. Although I may stop. I don't do any performing arts. I am now an oil painter. So
Oh,
I am still an artist. I've now shifted to the visual
I
arts.
think when we talked in the most recent episode about this, and this is something I've talked with my board chair Margaret with as well. She is in, I have very similar how I got into philanthropy story as you. For me, it was acting on stage. I took an internship at a theater. Part of that internship involved fundraising for the theater, and I realized that's what I was best at. And also that all the other gigs at the theater weren't real jobs. Theater's not a real business. No one's really. It's mostly
There are probably some people in some unions that would disagree. Like, if they're like, yeah, that's
I'll find you all kinds of union members of Actors Equity, and we can ask them what their real job is.
oh, the actors. Yeah, no, I'm talking about like on staff.
And
Yeah,
they will tell you, right, bartender, real estate agent, whatever, right? There's a number. There's people making living as a stage actor for sure. It's an extremely small percentage
yeah. No, I never thought about doing that. Yeah,
as
yeah,
compared
yes,
to like doctors. Almost all doctors are making a living off being a doctor. You don't
yes.
need to be a real estate agent all day and then doctor at night, right? Many artists do have to like have a full time job in order to be an artist.
Oh yeah, no, I believe me. There are moments where I feel like I need to have another part-time job on top of
You
what
can
I
fund,
supposedly do
but,
as a
but
consultant.
often you can be a fundraiser. Like you don't necessarily like fundraisers not the like most secure of jobs either. But like it is a way to be for a lot of folks to be engaged in the arts without having that relying on your like looks or talent or like a bill like you might you never know if your voice could get punched in the throat or something and not be able to sing anymore or like if your dancers could break an arm right
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. So
or anything I could fall down and hurt my face right like you don't have to like it's just it's a great way for a lot of folks to actually make a career in the arts. I think fundraising for it and a lot of
oh,
people
absolutely, because all arts organizations need, resource development. Be it fundraising or communications or community engagement, all of the above. To because arts, as you well know, art sort of lives in this perpetual uphill battle universe that, it's people love the arts, but it's never seen as like critical to a society. I mean,
There's
except
that.
people
It's
who
similar to what I
understand
was
it.
just
Yeah.
saying. There's this very publicly seen world of high-priced art, right? Like there's oil paintings that sell for very large amounts of money.
Millions of dollars. Yep, yep, yep.
There's a Klimt painting. I'm a big fan. I just
Yep.
don't
Oh, you are? Oh, okay. Oh, cool. Okay.
Lady with a Fan
Yep.
sold for $85 million. It's one painting, right? Most painters don't like. That's not a realistic thing for them to expect. It's not what their life is like. They're not doing that. Same with like actor. Like this is true for like lots of there's lots of fields that have a very public top 1%, right? That make it seem like that's what the industry is. Right? Even like professional athletes, like the NFL, for instance. Most NFL athletes are like people, not household names.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're 300-pound linemen who don't make that much money, and we're going to have enormous amounts of health problems. And that's not something that gets talked about or even thought about when we think about the like Travis Kelce, right? Who is a 1%er amongst the NFL, who are a bunch of 1% themselves, 1% athletes, right? Same, like I play golf, for instance. The vast majority of golfers are terrible, will never get paid for it. But everyone's aware that Tiger Woods is like one of the best paid athletes of all time, right? And again, there are other professions like painter. Every single painter gets paid to be a painter. Like if you're just painting houses and stuff, there's no
Yeah.
amateur unpaid version of that, right? But in the arts and in other fields, sports is a good comparison, and in some other fields, fields that are generally that do have unquestioned public good. Everyone listens to music, everyone watches actors, everyone enjoys sports. Still, will say not as worthy of funding, perhaps as certainly there are patrons of the arts, but like you're right. There's this general sense that perhaps we should fund malaria ahead of this.
Yeah, no, it's definitely. Although I will say, even sports ranks ahead. You're not gonna see a university say, "Oh no, we're gonna reduce our sports program and not look alumni." Then they'll quickly say, "No, we won't build that new art."
Counterpoint depends on what sport you're talking about.
Oh, true. I suppose. Yeah, football or basketball gets.
Nope,
Yeah.
some programs won't get cut. Other programs get cut really, really quick.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, true. Yeah. I mean, there's always exceptions.
Women, if it weren't for Title IX, they'd be cut. They would like one of the reasons so that they now cut men's programs because they would rather not add more women's programs. So when I was a hockey player and a golfer in college, but I only did golf in the NCAA because our hockey team was club because they didn't want to run a women's hockey team.
Okay.
Title IX said if they had a men's, they would have had to have a women's hockey team, which is
All right.
a big. You need to get a bunch of women to play hockey. Like it's so a club. You could have a club team, right? We all got to play and everything, and with one less ref. But like but again, there's as compared to other things that are more like of a profession, right? These as sports, arts, and sometimes exist a little bit outside of capitalism.
I could say, all right, yeah, I can see that. Yep.
The vast majority of sports that's played are played at the community. My dad's a sports historian, and if you want to read a really boring book, look him up. He doesn't. It's not the exciting side of sports that he covers, right? The most commonly played sport on any given day in the U.S. is softball, right? And I don't think anyone gets paid money to play softball. But that is by far if you turn in terms of number of games a day, that's the one that's happening the most often.
I played softball for several seasons.
Yeah. There's it's less common now, but at one point there was softball leagues everywhere and many Americans participating in a day-to-day basis in a non-pecuniary way. Like maybe there were dues to join the league and everything. But
that's kind of
fundamentally it wasn't like a business. There was no CEO making money, no shareholders, no it is not really a capitalist.
I was a very active league, the GLBT league here in DC, and I was in it for.
I've lost some games. Seriously, very very competitive.
Oh my God! Yeah, no, it was. I enjoyed it.
Near one of the park in Adams Morgan, and I would watch.
Yeah, no, we ended up having to. I loved it. It just was all the fields we played at were way out in Maryland, and so it really took up a chunk of my weekend, if the drive, because it
That's
was
not the point. You've got hours to kill, right?
well, yeah, I mean, it was,
Well, I like golf. Like golf
that's a whole nother track of story,
will
but it
make a
was,
whole bunch of time go by, and then I will feel like I've done exercise afterwards, right? And like the beer will taste better, and I'll feel like I've earned.
yeah, no, yeah,
You can just wake up and start drinking beer. You feel like a schlub, right? But my general point here, and I just think that there's so when I'm working on a philanthropic venture, right? If we're planning an event, I'm working in partnership with somebody, or I'm working with somebody that I've hired here on an unfunded list, and that person has no background in sports or arts or like any kind of civic activity, right? I personally find it very difficult to work with them. I remember once we'd already spent all of the budget, and I proposed that we like have a meeting to talk about like other ways to improve the program. Even though we already spent all the budget, but like I figured maybe we brainstorm some additional ways, non-money things we could do. I remember there's one of the team members so utterly confused by that suggestion. Like I was talking about, like speaking Greek, he's like, Did you hear, Dave, that the budget's done? Like we don't have any more money. I'm like, yes, I was just thought, and he was like, but if we don't have money, how could we do? Like he didn't understand
yeah.
that it was possible to like improve something without spending more money. And in fact, when David and I worked in video for a while, we would make videos for folks, and I found it when I came into video from a theater on the stage background. A lot of it very very similar, but video people who never did any theater, I again couldn't like had a very hard time working with them because they just sort of fundamentally don't. It's all like we get paid to do work, and I'm getting paid to do the work.
No,
then,
I absolutely, I completely.
then I will go
agree with
somewhere
you,
else and do
yeah.
my separate. It's work and leisure. Those are the two types of hours in the day, right? And for me, work is much broader than what they define, and it could include stuff I'm not, and it does all the time, right? I get paid some money every year to run unfunded lists, but certainly not like hourly.
No,
Right?
you and I are in the same. I mean, I, I don't. I mean, whether we call this was rooted in my growing up, I can't conceive of saying, okay, I only will do that for which I will be paid. I would sit at home and do nothing. I mean, look at. I mean, I volunteer for you. I mean, I volunteer for several other groups. I do volunteer stuff for my
Yes.
church.
Thank you for that
And
volunteer.
my pleasure. But it would never occur to me to say, well, we don't have the budget, so therefore we can't do anything. There's always something to do to
Volunteering as an evaluator with unfunded lists, which you do, is a great example. I do. There's people who, when I ask them, sometimes they'll assume that it's a paid thing, which I find a weird assumption.
Well, I mean, although I'll say, Dave, I'm doing it.
They don't ask, is it paid? They'll say, how much is it paid? I'm like, not paid at all, weirdo.
I do get paid for. I'm getting paid for one grant review gig. I will just so to be the exception. So I'm going to be reviewing grants for the New Jersey State Council for the Arts, starting now, doing their art multidisciplinary arts grants, and I will get a small stipend for that. I mean, again, it's not going to pay the rent, but it will. But that's one of the first times I've gotten paid to review grants because I mean, I volunteer for you. I volunteer for the catalog for Philanthropy here in town. It's for local. So most of when I do it as a volunteer. Even when I did the Washington Post Award for years, that was a volunteer gig. But this for the first time, New Jersey's going to give me a little stipend for reviewing. They also have the money to do that too. They've got
there's several questions there. There's one, is it a stipend or they're being paid? It's like program officers at foundation should be paid for their jobs.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No,
I think they can work in concert with a volunteer reviewing committee. And there is just much more, and I say this as someone who reads feedback more than anybody. Like I've read more comments on proposals than anybody, I think. And some of those comments come from, and oftentimes, when people send submissions to us, we ask them, have you received feedback from anywhere else? And one of my what's great is sometimes those submissions come in and they will copy and paste the feedback that they got from the actual funder, right?
Got it. Yeah.
So I have many examples of that, and I can compare it to like the report we put together. And like there, it's night and day on why a volunteer who's not being paid to write their words will give different higher quality depth of feedback than someone doing their job at work. I have to get this feed. We have to reject 90 people today. We have to give everyone a paragraph explaining why. Right? As opposed to, I have 2 months to read these 4 proposals that Dave has hand selected for me based on my interests. He's gone very far to make this something that I can do in my own time and make it very easy, right? I, in fact, still, if I could afford it, I think a stipend would be more than fair and would increase like the participation rates for sure. I absolutely can. I mean, we have like we had 370 evaluators participate last time, which one tells me I don't need to give them a stipend to get them to participate. But if I did, let's say if I give them all $10, it's starting to.
Yeah, no, it adds up. No, it's an interesting process. I mean, yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed
I
doing
try
it.
to make sure it's a great learning experience for them.
Oh, absolutely.
Many of them really want to be able to do this. I've also got people signing up on a daily basis.
Well, I mean, it's part of. I mean, even me professionally. I mean, I see my job as one of the things I happen to now be doing is I feel like I'm a professional proposal reviewer and application designer. I mean, I've now got deep experience with this, and the chance to do it with you guys at Unfunded List is it helps me professionally. It's intellectually interesting.
Yes,
And
sure.
you raised it yourself even at some of the train. I don't know if you did it this year, but I remember last year's training where you speak of you can tell when the paid program officers aren't really paying attention. It doesn't make sense because why should these foundations spend a lot of time and energy on organizations they're not working with? I mean, yes, we'd love to get feedback, and the nonprofits would love to get feedback. Why didn't I get my grants? But if you look at it from the foundation standpoint, what if strategically, if they've got limited time, they need to be focusing on the organizations with whom they're going to be having a relationship rather than the ones that they're not. So it is a challenge. You wish it could be otherwise, but yeah, I mean,
Sometimes they might have an answer for you as to why you didn't get the grant. But I think most of the time they probably wouldn't. Don't
no,
ask.
I don't think
They
they
don't want to give you the answer. They're being cagey. They picked other programs. That's the answer.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
like, what do you? What I think the authors really want. What could I have done differently?
that I get. When I did the Washington Post Award, and I was chair of that selection committee for years, I had organizations all the time coming in and say, what can I do to win? Or I had groups that were finalists year after year after year, and the executive director would bring me in and says, okay, what do I have to do now to get to be the winner? I'm like, well, it isn't about, it's also about who else applied. I mean, there are amazing groups here in DC. It just, there isn't a magic formula. If you do these 6 things, I promise you will get the Washington Post Award. It just didn't work. But they all want to know, what do I have to do? And we did give feedback. I mean, and we're grateful for it. I mean, Spur Local does, we fill out, feedback that the applicants get, and it is helpful. But again, we're doing it as volunteers. We're not doing it as, as paid staff. So,
And when I've seen those, when the paid staff have done it, so there's a very small number of organizations where there are paid staff who only decline.
I remember you mentioned that. I don't know any, but I know you do. But I've never.
There's a couple articles on the website I've written, and I got a new one coming up with a bunch of quotes. And actually, National Center for Family Philanthropy just had a really cool blog post from someone who talked about a case study, and they changed their declination template to include real, actual feedback from the decline process. They had just been saying the same decline letter for years. They added a software, made it a lot easier for them to add a paragraph to that letter that included real notes from the process. Definitely
Cool.
newsletter. Like if you're on the Nick's newsletter, then in the most recent email there. That was pretty interesting. So and again, there's like the Jim Joseph Foundation, I think, has a guy who's director. I think his job title is director of declination. I might be wrong about that. It should, if it's not, like,
I'll go look up the NCFP blog post. No, that's actually interesting. I mean,
he wrote a really good one on this stuff. In general, the professionals are saying don't spend too much time giving them feedback. They're not saying don't give them feedback. They're saying, listen, there's really not too much to be had here other than wasted time for both the grantee and us. And I really agree with them there. If you keep talking to them, they're going to think there's a chance of them getting a grant. If you know there isn't, like you got to
Nothing is worse than the indefinite maybe. You know, the definite no is always
indefinite maybes. Yeah, I've been in cycles with folks, and I know, like, and I recognize there was this one lady who made me jump through hoops for years, early in my career, and I recognize now that I had no chance at any point. But she didn't want. It's uncomfortable to say no to this passionate young fundraiser with a great cause, and it's not you would say yes. You just know you can't get it approved at your organization, so you don't like. It's just it's tough for you gotta have some empathy for these gatekeepers sometimes. They have to. Not all gatekeepers have to gatekeep. These folks have to. Their
yeah.
organizations can't fund every proposal they get, and so they have to do some sort of decision-making process. And most of them are doing their best. And I generally agree.
Oh, I agree.
The feedback side of it really shouldn't be the focus of the grant-making organizations. And the good news there is that, like, it's easy. It's our focus. We do a good job. And we're looking forward to a big batch of proposals coming up.
Yeah. No, and more and more people are learning about what you guys do. I mean, you know,
We're getting the word out there.
yeah. I mean, you
Helping.
saw me. I posted
You're
about
helping.
it on LinkedIn, and I've had
We
several.
got that binder. We're gonna I imagine the picture of you with the binder is gonna be the promo art for this episode because we've already got a good high quality photo of you.
Oh, that's true. You do, yes, and
And
I'm
I have
sure there'll
learned.
be.
I tell people about the binder, and a few of them have been like, "Oh yeah, I make a binder."
We should
You're not the
we
only.
should have
You are
like
not
a
the only
little
one.
mosaic of all of us with binders. I listen, and I have to because I will have you guys, Spur Local, and New Jersey, and so I gotta have 3 binders because otherwise and I have to print them out. I'm old school enough that I
Print all
cannot.
the proposals out. You put and you 3-hole punch. You own a 3-hole punch.
I do.
You
It's
3-hole.
right there. Yeah, no, and it all gets recycled, and I do it double sided. I use old paper that I didn't go. So
Occasionally, sometimes these folks, to cheat character limits, will mess with the margins. Has that ever become a problem for you with the 3-hole punching?
no, because usually when I print it out, like Google will to make it print out, it'll kind of
Oh, okay, yeah.
reshape
But
it.
yeah, for folks, if you're trying, don't go too far to the left because the reviewers might be printing your proposal out and putting it into a binder. You don't
Yeah,
want that 3-hole punch going through you like an important point you're trying to make.
yeah. Also depends on the reviews.
I get
Yeah,
some
so
stuff where like it's just words they knew they only had 2 pages, right? It's like they mess with the margins all the way out to the edge of the documents.
yeah, no, we all, yeah, I check
There
out.
are a
No,
lot
but
of
yeah, it's
reviewers are might even be. I mean, there's reviewers 30 years older than you, Marshall, and like they're probably printing. They're probably not reading that stuff on a screen. And the people making the final decisions, right? This is very interesting to me. The line and I'd like to get into some depth on it now because
yeah.
you've got experience with both. The line between voluntarily reading a grant proposal and being paid either as a consultant or a grant maker
Yeah.
to read and move forward grant proposals. Because as I understand, you do both. You engage in both the voluntary and uh, the paid activity, which is cool.
Yeah.
What? But tell me about that line. Like where is the line for you on that?
Um, you know, the paid gig was a kind of a side, you know, benefit as it were. I mean, I didn't go after it because I thought I could get paid for it. I know it is helpful for these programs to have community members reviewing grants, whether it's for you guys or Spur Local, Catalog for Philanthropy, or that. I think that having peer review and community reviewers is an effective way to bring diverse, lenses into looking at applications, or in a way that's even more challenging, for a foundation that's got, maybe 10 trustees and maybe a program officer or two. Again, I see it just sort of as a civic duty almost for me. I mean, it's just because, the more I can help nonprofits articulate their case better and help donors, funders to make smart giving decisions because they've got intelligent information that explains, why this group, why now, why this is the right funder combination. That's important stuff. And so anything I can do to help promote good grant applications, good program design, and then good giving based on the fact that we're looking at, this kind of information and it can make a smart, informed decision. I love being part of that. I mean, that I got paid for one of them is actually was a nice side benefit. It's I'd love to do more of it to get paid, sure.
Sure.
But I would still do it. I mean, I've been doing it for decades, I feel like now at various.
You also have contracts with grant makers where you have to do, and I imagine much more work.
But not the proposal review. Interestingly enough, I have helped with proposal application design
So
process.
proposal reviewing do voluntarily.
Yes.
Other aspects of philanthropy consulting you get paid to do.
Yes, I mean, and I spend a lot of time talking to. I mean, I spent a lot of time talking about the questions that funders ask when they are putting their application together or when they're working with current or potential grantee partners. That the types of questions that they ask is very, very important. How they ask those kind of questions is very, very important. So I spent a lot of time, working on, it's a combination of the various movements like trust-based philanthropy or Project Streamline, all those, let's make it easier or don't put so many barriers for nonprofits have to climb over to apply for things. At the same time, you want funders to have the right information that they need to make smart decisions. And so they've got to make sure they ask the right kind of questions in the right kind of ways that they have what they need to make decisions. And so that I have been spending now more time on recently.
Yes.
This whole question, what kind of questions do we have?
I think the public, this is similar to the earlier talk, like thinking about the most famous of athletes versus average athletes in the day-to-day playing sport. Like same thing going on here in philanthropy. I think we might all jump to, right, someone has to read the proposals and make decisions. And I think a lot of people in the public think that's all of the work. In particular, there are, I think, and I've criticized foundations and big philanthropy and how philanthropy works many times during this podcast and in other episodes. And David and I made a satirical mockumentary about a foundation once. It's definitely a ripe topic, but I think a lot of the folks that criticize philanthropy right now, some of them have never done it themselves, and so they don't really have a full picture of what it is they're attempting to satirize, right? And so, like, it's not just for trust-based philanthropy, for instance, is a very legitimate set of practices that often gets somewhat misunderstood by the public. There was a recent little bit of a flap going back and forth. As far as I can tell, so I like the concept of trust-based philanthropy.
I do too.
There's a nonprofit that exists. This is similar like Giving Tuesday. I like the idea of Giving Tuesday, but then there's an organization that exists called Giving Tuesday, and they exist basically just to defend the practice against its detractors. Like whenever I hear about trust-based philanthropy, it's because they are explaining why trust-based philanthropy is real, right? And why the recent critical article is often. And when I look at the real practices, which I agree are great practices, they're all things that I thought would have said were great practices long before this organization existed. Giving Tuesday was a trend long before the organization existed. These are just trends that exist in philanthropy. And so there's my little.
No, I mean there are parts of it that it is still. I was thinking about.
There's a day-to-day version of the work that is very unseen, right? So, like Giving Tuesday is something that I think a lot of people in the public know about, but the stress that puts on fundraisers every year to compete with each other on the same day, rather than come up with their own complementary schedules or whatever, and just sort of the push to make it more like a retail holiday, like it's designed off of Cyber Monday.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean that
they're not great things. That's a different practice. It's a weird thing to take an idea from, but so when it comes to the fundraisers, we did many episodes with fundraisers talking about their day-to-day challenges. And the one thing that I think it's very and just continues to be misunderstood by lots of folks, even people who know a lot about the space of philanthropy and who are so-called philanthropy critics, is there is day-to-day work being done behind the scenes of philanthropy that is not choosing winners and being powerful, sitting atop the pile of money. It's just
Oh,
administrative work.
it's hard. I mean, and I wrote something about how do nonprofits be worthy of that trust, trustworthy partners. And one of them was, don't forget that these funders and actually are nonprofits too. They've got budgets to meet, deadlines to meet. They lose their minds when it's time for a board meeting, just like the nonprofits lose their minds when it's a board meeting. They're still operational. I mean, and I see it with groups that I come into contact with or work with. It's like, yeah, no, there's a whole operational ongoing process. It isn't just about, oh, let's give the money away. Giving money away is hard, and it's hard to do it well. But operationally it requires every bit as much undergirding of components and process and organizational structure as some other nonprofits do. So, and you're right. I do think that gets forgotten, or it's never. No one pauses and says, "Oh yeah, I guess you're right." Yeah, no, these guys have got to make a budget just like you do. It's not
You can
unlimited
look at the
money.
form and say like, "Oh, these questions are overly burdensome." One of my like, at least this is a very common refrain right now. Everybody nods their heads and says, "Great!" Like that, asking grantees to write a report is like this like crazy, huge, burdensome thing that we're asking them to do. And like, I don't hear that from fundraisers. Like the folks that send us proposals love updating their funders. They are very eager to update their funders, and having the opportunity to send a report's great. And if you think that's too much to do,
Well, I guess the clarity I would add to that, Dave, is I think that where funders say, please report on, like, show us where every single dollar and penny went when they go to, I think, yeah,
it can
nonprofits
be.
love to tell their story about what they're doing. I mean, the funders that just say, we want to know what you're doing, and we're going to have a conversation, and we're going to be kept up to date. So we don't need a formal, okay, please show us, to the number exactly how many people, 537 people walked in your door. That doesn't help. It's the conversations that I think.
So I get asked, I fill
That
out,
do.
I have to report to a variety of folks. And actually, I find the folks that don't give me money sometimes have the most burdensome forms of all. The most difficult thing to fill out that I've done in the last 2 years was to get platinum status on GuideStar. They ask, I thought, inappropriate questions about my sexual orientation. It's none of GuideStar's business.
Yeah.
I understand
Yeah.
why they're asking, but it's not appropriate for them. And it's not appropriate for them to ask that about my board members, the people who I serve. It's just not appropriate. It's not an appropriate question. I understand why you're asking.
Yeah.
But right, I'd like to know everybody I meet. I'd love to know, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't.
No, but I do think
you to this, and that's almost all what they were asking about. But Kettering Family Foundation gave me a grant a year ago. I owe a report by the end of the month. I guess it's like, I'm gonna have to spend some time on this, and that's a little bit of a burden. But they gave me funding to run my program. So on an hourly basis, right, I'm getting paid a ton of money to write this report.
I think that's
per hour writing this report than like I ever have, right? And I'm maybe gonna get another grant from them in the future. I want to be able to send this report. They asked me 2 questions with long character. It's like, give us like with long character limit updates. I'm very happy to do that. It's going to be some copy and paste, which I'm sure they understand. There are examples. I think we can look at the like worst examples, right? And there are some places now. There are some sites out there that will highlight some of the worst examples in philanthropy, right?
yes.
And with all of them, I can see how they got there, right? Basically, if you put yourself in the shoes of this grant making organization, you understand that this one probably has no full-time staff. And this is a form that was put together so that the like various disparate members can all get their questions answered. And like that means some of the questions are redundant or whatever. And like it's not great. That organization probably should hire someone like you at that point to come up with and they have no real reason to make it easier on the grantees.
Yeah, no, that's happened in my when I talk about the questions, I definitely go through the, if you ask for it, use it, and if you don't use it, don't ask for it, kind of thing. And I mean, even
I like that advice.
Even the group that the family foundation that that I've been working with, they've even evolved what they needed. I mean, and they and family foundations go through this. It's all online, lovely, but they still have to, print out a report for Uncle Joe, who doesn't even have the computer. So you still got to come up with some of this stuff. That it's so again, those are the realities. But I think
Uncle Joe, the grandpa or the uncle, there's somebody involved that's not going to change how they do this.
Yeah,
There's no argument. You can't even start having this conversation with them.
And that definitely is happening. But I think that at least it is.
He'll die though. Actually, Uncle Joe will.
Yes, I mean, well, there is that.
He'll forget.
I mean, I certainly have seen over the past, several years, though. I definitely am seeing more light being shined on this process of what are you asking, and are you actually using this information, or do you, if you ask the question, tell me how many people benefited from your program last year. Do you really need to know that? If you aren't going to pay attention to the precise number, then don't ask for it. Because what I do try to remind funders is how nonprofits react to some kind of questions. I mean, if a funder says, "Tell me how many people your organization served last year," the nonprofit's thinking, "Okay, is there a number I have to say below which I won't get the grant? What are they really trying to look for?" And if the funder doesn't even actually look at the precise number, they just want to know about who they're serving, they're not helping the process. And my encouragement, take that language out. Just say, tell me about the people that you're serving, not tell me how many people. I don't, if it's, I don't need to know that. The nonprofit's going to probably tell you, yes, we helped thousands of people last year. That's all I want to know. And if that's all they're going to use. But if they're data people and they've got numbers they want to crunch, absolutely. Put it in there. Explain why you're asking for these kind of numbers. But I think there's a lot of that both sides need to do. So
this is one of the strong arguments for having things like the SDGs at the global level, so that organizations can have a universally understood set of numbers that they are keeping track of, and can just simply answer where they are in respect to universally understood metrics when there's no framework. And it's just because this is how it works in capitalism. There's no framework for how a business brags about what they do, right? How in advertising, it's basically still the Wild West. What you can say in ads, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the exact same firms will get hired to go and do the outreach and communications work for nonprofits, and they do Wild West type stuff, and so there's a nonprofit that I've talked about on the show that will say that 100% that's raised a lot of money by saying 100% of the donations go to building wells in Africa, which isn't true. It can't possibly be true. I don't even have to look at the numbers to know it's not true. How'd you get
That drives me crazy. I mean, that right there, what you just described is one of the things that I think is one of the breakdowns. Nonprofits feel compelled to say stuff like that because the funding community,
you get rewarded for saying stuff like that. You'll raise more money by saying something.
Because the funders had said, we want all of our program, there is no such thing as overhead. It's changing now, thank God, but it is.
Someone made a documentary finally, 20 years after I first became aware of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, listen,
we are the overhead myth. He eventually quit his job because he wanted his organization to stop talking about it because he realized he made a huge mistake.
I mean, we've been talking about that in the nonprofit starvation cycle, and it's all that kind of stuff for decades, and it still drives me crazy because this is where, because I've been on both sides of this, I know what it costs. These nonprofits, these programs don't spring out of thin air, and they don't happen for free. There are people who are making, oh great, you love that, program because it spitted all this data for you. Well, guess what? They're having to pay someone who runs the data, and they had to buy the software well, that might be considered overhead, but without that, you ain't gonna have the other piece of it.
Or overhead runs efficient programs. Obviously, it can't be. I mean, you could be all overhead. I would say if the organization's got a 99% overhead, maybe look into it a little bit, and you might have run.
Again, it depends on the type of organization. I mean,
I worked at an international exchange program for a while, And it was basically entirely overhead what we did. We did paperwork and visas and did plane tickets for these and placements and arranged interviews for these fellows, right? It's
Yeah.
almost entirely overhead.
Overhead,
The
yeah.
but the ways that we bent over backwards to describe parts of the program as program when they were very clearly overhead. I also had to repeat. My role there was sales, so I repeatedly had donors telling me that, like, I in meetings, like, make sure none of the money goes to his salary, like pointing at me, right? And I'm like, do you understand that if we have better salesmen, then maybe you wouldn't have to donate as much money. Like, this stuff is again, and if you're in the investment side of this stuff, VC people they wouldn't if they saw a company with spending 9% overhead, they'd be like, how do you can't run the business on that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, but yeah, you would never though have a business held to account because they were investing too much in sales or a new shop or a store, but yet the nonprofit sector,
They're retaining their employees somehow.
yeah, 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 and so I do think again that's where both sides of this, funders are growing in their understanding of what it actually takes, but nonprofits are still timid about explaining to the world, the cost of doing business. How do we actually run nonprofits in a way that's sustainable, that's ethical, that pays our employees what they should be paid, all that kind of stuff. Nonprofits are still not as much as they used to be, but are still timid about having that kind of conversation. And I think funders have the opportunity to be more open and to say, no, tell us what it really costs. Because they need to make smart decisions about their investment in a nonprofit. And if they don't have all the information, because the nonprofit's sort of hiding it, withholding it, then that does a disservice to the funder too. I mean, like if I'm making a grant decision,
It's a big cyclical problem, I would say.
it's that's why the starvation cycle is still with us. I mean, that was
I'll
coined
say
100 years ago.
so. To go back to some earlier points,
Yeah,
the do-gooder folks that get into fundraising and are, end up submitting proposals. It's usually not because they're trying to, like, getting paid very well was probably not on their list of reasons why they got into that profession, which is one of the reasons why they haven't, like, necessarily advocated consistently to have those extra benefits at work, and why they've been, tolerant of cuts and tolerant of low pay, and tolerant of the burnout conditions, because they got their motivations for getting into it were different. And in some ways, you could say that those motivations get taken advantage of in the current sector.
There was an article not terribly long ago written by Dawn Wolf for Inside Philanthropy, and she was talking about that very fact. Was actually talking about the very fact that so many nonprofit staff members do work in the sector because there's it makes them feel good. They've got great intentions, but the reality, she reminded us all, was that your landlord doesn't care how fulfilled you are at your work. The landlord wants its rent paid, and that's something that is facing a lot of nonprofit staff, and it's becoming a subject that's talked about more. Thank goodness now. In fact, this year I actually worked with the family foundation that I'm consulting to, and I actually had them add a question that says, what is your organization doing to promote the well-being, professional development, and emotional health of your staff and your volunteers? And it's been interesting to see the responses to that new question. So
I appreciate that. I'll say adding that question, but not giving them more money isn't.
well, yeah, I think they need to, they're learning. There may or may not be
Hopefully,
the
answers to this question will give them information, and they'll realize why more money needs to go to certain things.
And they have funded, I will say, and they have funded some like employee training and employee well-being classes, so they are funding some of that. But I think broadly,
I'll say, as someone who got burnt out at a couple different nonprofits that were more than happy to overwork me, right? And for early when I was in my 20s, there was I don't remember any conversation about, like, self-care or, like, taking care of your employees, anything really. Like, it was much more, this is not that long ago, like before the financial crisis. Uh, especially when if you're in your early 20s and you're working there in DC, you were supposed to be in there early and just work until you were exhausted. There was no one making any point to the contrary. So, and again, like we're saying, a lot of like there's a combination of things. One, you go into working at a nonprofit, you do so because you're a do-gooder and you want to do good, not
Yeah.
because you want to make money. You've made a bad choice. It's America. It's all kinds of
Yeah.
places.
Yeah.
Right? So I had a college degree and I had skills, and then I could make money at a wealth management firm. Right? I don't think I'd like working there though, so I don't. It's not something that I chose to do. And I really thought, I guess, I really thought that there would be more reward and recognition for the like hard work I was doing. And then there was also that earlier point that I was talking about, because a lot of us come from arts backgrounds or other civic, uh, um, have experience with voluntary associations. We're able to get more done, even though we don't always have those resources at work, and those sorts of things. I mean, I was using the free version of softwares at many places when I really needed to be using the paid version of it.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I
And
do think it's changed though recently, though. I mean, I do think that it is. I'm seeing it talked about with funders and with nonprofits who are being much more frank about the whole concept of we need to right size salaries. We need to spend intentional time on taking care of our employees' emotional health, especially post pandemic. I mean, and so at least
that
I'm
part of
seeing
it
it.
I've been seeing. So I don't work in a nonprofit anymore, but I get into an office every now and then, and that we were the last time I saw you in person, we were at the Open Gov Hub there.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, they have some things there. There's a meditation room, right? And
No,
like
I mean
here's everything to try to make it more pleasant at work and those sorts of things. And those things are nice. But the best way to deal with burnout would be to limit the hours and pay more.
yeah,
And those are two things that I don't really see happening. I see lots of folks interested, aware of the issue, and aware of it. And to be fair, I'm not saying they should, like, funders are usually giving their giving amounts are like based on some math.
yeah,
It's not like they can just, if they raise it, then they'll be giving less in the future or one less grant now. Like so it's not necessarily there's an easy way to raise these salaries. We have gotten into a cyclical situation, but a lot of the solutions, so people very proud sending out their newsletter announcing their like various self-care initiatives. And like when I help people who are applying for jobs now, I'm a very common reference for folks who are trying to get new jobs. And a big part of those conversations with those folks is what the mental health will be like. Because it's usually a job in fundraising, and I know I can identify red flags in those job descriptions. And that's a huge part of my very first referrals was just about trying to get folks the job, no matter what it was, right? But I tell people they shouldn't even apply for it anymore sometimes, because I look at the thing and I'm like, this is going to be terrible. In 9 months, you're going to hate it. You're going to be asking me to help you get another job. So let's skip ahead to that now, right? And then there's a lot of folks who work in the capitalist side of things and enjoy making money. When I explain this stuff to them, they're just like, "Why would anyone do that?" They don't understand it. And there's a lot of people out there who wanted something from their careers, right? Some comfort at work and the opportunity to give back, and they for a lot of them it went a lot. They got burnt out a lot worse than I did. I by no means am I the like poster child for this stuff.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
have a decent amount of privilege to fall back on, which some folks don't. And really right now, the current state of things, if you weren't like, I didn't have any student debt, right? Even though I went to the most expensive college in the country. My fellow Dickinson graduates mostly went into money-making professions, largely because of that reason. And some of them, with our 20th reunion coming up, still got that debt chasing them around, still have to work to get it off their back. So without that, I don't think even I would have tolerated the.
No, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes sense. But I mean, like I said, at least it is talked about more than it was 10 years ago, even. So at least, it's becoming less the secret, and it's becoming less about, okay, we're all really getting overly focused on what the CEO is making and things like that.
Yes,
It's more
I was
like,
about to bring that up. We're up. You keep bringing things up right before I.
oh, okay.
Oh, it's great. I like it.
Yeah.
Because that's the flip side of it. There is a lot of coverage of people making too much money. and in fact, I interviewed a foundation head and his wife from it was Jay Ruderman and Shira, I think, from the Ruderman Family Foundation. I hope I didn't get that wrong. And I'm almost certain I got it right. And it was actually like someone wrote an article about how he gets paid to run the foundation, and he was eager to talk about what he does, why he gets paid a salary to work there, and how consistently when they've done salary comparisons, it's the same. It's what someone who does that job should get paid.
Yeah.
And it's not none of these things are crazy. There's I can count on one hand the number of nonprofit employees making over $1 million a year. I don't know enough people. Even if I took everybody I know and used all of their hands, I wouldn't be able to count the number of for-profit CEOs making over $1 million. And yes, there's definitely some people who are concerned about that side of things. But to pick up on other than a very, very small number of overpaid nonprofit CEOs, right? Like maybe the Red Cross lady. And a few others, right? Or it's sometimes the highest paid nonprofit worker in my state is a hockey coach. And it's basketball coach probably in Virginia. And it's basketball coach in North Carolina. I'm sure it's basketball coach in North Carolina and a lot of other states. That stuff's a little off as well. But we're not talking about a development assistant, the average development assistant salary, which is probably below the poverty line.
Oh my God! Certainly, it certainly is. I mean, my question, when people talk about, oh, that CEO is getting paid too much, I ask them, so what is too much? What is that? What do you even mean too much?
It's always a fraction of what they bring in. First of all, every time you look at it, even the Red Cross lady, she's raising 300 times what she's getting paid. So
yeah, I mean, and again, we almost never hear that said of the corporate sector, and no wonder if we don't.
They're like he's making the salary, and so he is that valuable.
Yeah, exactly. Therefore, and no wonder nonprofit CEOs, look over at the corporate sector, go, gosh, I could go over there and make a whole lot of money, and nonprofits don't want to lose smart people. But yeah, it's definitely one of those. Again, a few bad actors, over the decades, have then messed it up for a lot of people, and it takes a long time to change perceptions.
And you brought up yet another point. There is the capture. Is our most talented people in our sector are ripe to be captured by other sectors.
Yeah,
you can go in. You don't even have to offer them the average salary in your field to entice them away from ours. Right? You can underpay them in your world.
Yeah,
step up to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know lots of people. Most of the most talented people I worked with over my nonprofit career have since, because they are talented, and because their and not because they needed money or they're greedy, because their landlord needed money and is greedy.
They've got a family. They've got it is
No, well, eventually it's with a lot of them. They was fine while they were single, and then they became fit to be family expenses. Another reason why I've been able to make it this long. It's amazing how cheap life is when it's just you and you live in rural Maine. Why I'm able to afford these fancy plates.
Oh, I know. Listen, don't even get started about being an entrepreneur, because I guess having just new health insurance as an individual solo person, it's like the country doesn't make it easy, but that's a whole nother conversation.
So there are no big paydays coming for me, but there might be big expenses. Something expensive could happen to me in the near future, right?
Yeah,
and I don't. That would be that could potentially end unfunded list, which is rough to think about.
Right, yeah.
So you talk about these things with your clients and try to work through the very difficult work of making sure lots of stuff. It sounds like. So one, they've got goals for the world that they want the grants to accomplish. And also they're now increasingly thinking about the people who work at the organizations they're supporting.
Yes.
And so are there other things to think about? One question that I'm always interested in is, so is there a particular issue that your main grant making client focuses on, like health or education or
anything? No, although it is beginning to narrow a little bit. They are
okay. So
I mean,
look,
only because they're sort of continuing to identify where their passion in as a trustee, but they are also looking into. So I just finished facilitating some roundtables of grantee partners to dig into a particular issue, so that the funder could actually do a little bit more learning. Whether or not it makes a changing in its grant making strategy is yet to be seen. But they're in the, we know we need to learn more about this, and which may end up kind of focusing in, and they over the years have been continuing to refine, because it's about relationships. I mean, I know other family foundations that love to talk about, they're all about relationships, but they had like 120 grantees, and then it all of a sudden occurred to them, we can't have relationships with this many people. So they took it down to like 60 grantees over a transitional period of time, and they were then much more able to have better relationships. My client is essentially doing the same thing. They're having, the three staff, they're all part-time, are able to have much better ongoing sustained relationships with
yes,
grantees in a way that just wasn't possible when they had 80 grantees or 100. I mean, so I think it is,
I
it's
like
it,
that.
it's definitely, and that I am hearing a lot of places, like when I go to conferences with other philanthropy and funders, the whole idea of relationship building as one of the key drivers is solving a lot of problems, because reports become less necessary when you're actually talking to your grantee partners every month or every other month, because you're engaging with them. All of a sudden you're like, well, yeah, no, we know exactly what you're doing. We don't need you to fill out this form anymore. We know what's going on.
If
So
you can have one program officer for every 30 grantees,
yeah, and that's about the right threshold.
that
Yep.
program officer is full time, then you're right. You will have all the information you need, and you probably don't have to even ask them to submit reports or proposals at all.
Yeah.
They will just be regularly meeting, trying to be helpful in ways other than the grant. Keep them updated on like when the deadlines are and everything. Try not to be burdensome with them. Maybe do intros and stuff. That's a very interesting
Add
profession.
to that multi-year funding, so that your grantee partners
How can
aren't
you possibly? So
necessarily.
that's the thing that people are like, oh, we're going to give multi-year funding to these organizations, right? That there has to be some sort of personal relationship if you're going to commit to years of
Yeah,
funding, right? And
but
it can't just be a like, oh yeah, we know each other. It needs to be a strong
yeah,
working.
no, absolutely. And where that's working, where again it's relationship built, a lot of communication, and then they do switch to like a multi-year grant making, and it's all unrestricted giving. The relationship transforms. I mean, I see it with my client. I've heard about it and talked about it with other funders around the country. It just changes everything. I mean, it's just, they know what's going on. But and the nonprofits don't feel overworked or overburdened. They see the foundation as a partner, as an ally, who's in it with them, who's giving them resources, and if they're doing what they should be doing, they're giving connections and ideas. Are not just simply handing a check over. So where I see that happening, it is amazing, sort of the strength of the relationship, and a lot more does get done. When other than if you're looking at over focus on process or over focus on forms and making it all very transactional. I'm not, philanthropy is really hard to do well, frankly. It's all either side of it.
Back to the issue question. As you know, there are funders who are like, we fund in health, we fund in
Yeah,
education, we are funding climate change solutions in
yeah,
America. Generally, it's who and what, where and what, right? There's a regional preference
yeah.
and it's like topic preferences. Most funders can be described, I think, by answering the like who and what.
Yes, and I don't have I don't have a
Where and
problem.
what they're fun. Yeah.
It gives you clarity. I spoke to an executive director of a foundation, a family foundation on the East Coast, that was having this conversation about how do we build relationships, and we got all these grantees, and actually the nonprofits in the community said, "Look, you're trying to be all things to all people. We don't actually know what you're focusing on. Tell us what you want to do as a funder, and if we fall in your category, awesome. If not, we know what's going on, but right now we don't even know what you're trying to do." And so that was a wake-up call to the funder, who said, yes, we actually need to put a little bit better box around what we're doing, so it lets them say, here's what we're supporting, here's what we're not supporting, we want to work with you. It
One
lets
of
it
my
be more
favorite things in
arbitrary.
philanthropy is when a foundation puts a like list of what we do not fund on the website. Like, I don't think that list has ever been effective in deterring an applicant. Like,
Sometimes, but at least giving a little bit. I'm a big fan of structure is good. I mean,
you need a
that doesn't
relationship.
mean
You can like actually complete. You can't just put that list up.
yeah.
And like sometimes I've seen lists that like if you look at the list, it's like, you don't seem to fund anything. Like,
Well, yes. I
I
mean,
once saw programs like that it was a bulleted list, and one of the bullets was programs. We don't
yeah,
fund.
yeah. No, I don't. Yeah, it's stuff like that. Those are the things that I hope to, and I really encourage all funders to take a moment and read that stuff. When was I asked funders, when was the last time any of your trustees actually sat down and looked at the application online or read your application?
It could be
And
a shockingly long amount of time. We have a funder where I point something out in their RFP and they're like, "Oh, we've not read this. That's not everything." They had
if I tell
information.
people, I
It
just
had,
told people the web, yeah, if it's been more than 5 years since a funder has looked at, I mean, think about what was going on five
I
years ago.
change my form every 6 months to keep it current with what we're doing. And
Yeah.
it's crazy to me that like actual funders don't like will
Oh,
go decades without changing it. It's because they had something that worked, and a
yep.
change might require everyone to approve it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh no, we can't even
Then
try.
it's a trustee. It's like changing bylaws. It's like, oh my
Uncle
God.
Joe was like, no, I don't know.
No, my client takes a look at the application. I mean, since I've been working with him every year, we don't toss the whole thing, but we definitely refine stuff. We spent a lot of time this past year taking things out of the application and moving it into an FAQs page of the website. They were clogging up the application with a lot of explanation
Hmm.
that frankly wasn't helping, and it made it more confusing to
That's
read.
interesting to me. I
So
would wonder how many of so part of me wants to say like the applicants aren't going to read the FAQs, so you should put it in the application because they have to read that.
I'm going to be asking about that in a survey that we're sending out to the grantees in about a month. So, because that's a new thing, and I do know, they held a webinar for all the applicants.
They don't go to the webinar either.
Yeah, well, their group is.
Some do, but like most applicants aren't don't.
They were the applicants were very excited to have this opportunity to talk about it. Because their process is not, well, technically it's not an invitation only. It's basically they've got their grantee partners, and that's the group that gets funding, and they occasionally kind of bless and release some groups over time, and then occasionally a new one comes in, but it's basically a
Release.
bless and release, and that's my term. But and
I
they had to have
but
and they had to let go where the relationship wasn't what they wanted. It was not about whether or not the nonprofit was doing the thing. It was the relationship wasn't what they were wanted. And they gave the nonprofit multiple opportunities to say, hey, we don't think this relationship is working. And the nonprofit didn't respond well or whatever. And so the funder, the foundation had to say, we're not going to be supporting you any longer, and so and that's better for everybody, because then it doesn't, I mean, no one wants to go into a relationship that's not positive. That's a drag on everything, on you. It's nice to get a check, but if I hate talking to
there are many organizations doing the work that can be funded, and it's a matter of matching those relationships with folks doing work that you like. And when it comes to the issues these days, so some issues are very complicated these days, right? So like
absolutely.
funder is interested in like gun safety in the US, for instance, right? Or like there's many funders that would like to see an end to conflict in the Middle East.
Yeah,
And
no, I mean, they're
they want to solve climate change and other things like that. This isn't just like, you go back to Carnegie, right, building libraries, which is also complicated. But it doesn't require an enormous amount of knowledge about a like complicated piece of science in order to fund efficiently. Like we knew libraries were good for communities, and communities wanted them and came up with a good. We've got a wonderful Carnegie Library here in Waterville that I go to sometimes to work. Free internet there, and ours has a seed library. We can get soon. I'll be able to get seeds because it's
oh, cool.
planting season coming up. Libraries are great, right? But again, right now, if a funder's like, oh, I want to, particularly if they want to like work on immigration or like some other stuff, one of those issues, they're going to need to learn a lot. They're also going to need to understand like what philanthropy can do on that issue, right?
Yep. And
Uh,
that's what my clients in the middle of right now. I mean, I'll name it. It's youth mental health, and it's a gigantic,
right, this is
complicated.
a good one.
Yeah,
Many things philanthropy can do
yeah,
when it comes to mental health, but it is philanthropy cannot do everything,
yeah. And
and
they realize that, and nor can the nonprofits.
that they have no role to play.
And so so they're looking at this, where, what can the government do, and they are looking, my client are looking very specifically at the prevention, that before it becomes an issue. So they're looking at what are the organizations that are not mental health organizations, they're youth organizations that are supporting the mental well-being of the young people they're working with, and it's getting these kids set up so that they don't make bad choices, and they don't, and so they're finding their swim lane, as one of them actually said, finding their swim lane when they know the government's taking care of, some components of it, and there are nonprofits. But and I when I did the roundtables, I was asking these nonprofits, how do you all talk about the enormity of the problem with your own capacity as a nonprofit, knowing that you really can't and should be all things to all people? How do you, as an organization, figure out where you're going to be, which then helps funders to know, okay, here's how we're going to work together with you. But when nonprofits do try to do everything for everybody, they can get overwhelmed because the problems are super complex and super
They can also
multi-layered.
end up donating to organizations that aren't in a position to solve the issue.
Yeah, exactly. Or make an impact on whatever piece of it they want to
Like
make an impact.
there was the number one fundraising day in Facebook history was the day that the U.S. government started separating children from their mothers and putting the children into cages. And people saw some pictures of children in cages at the border and donated over $50 million in the course of 24 hours to an organization called Races, which is an acronym. I forget the acronym. It's an excellent organization, and they did excellent work with that money. I really want to make sure my point is not that races should not have money. There was nothing they can do for those kids who were in the cages, though. Those were wards of the state. If you will really, if that's what you want to make a difference on, you needed to be clogging up your congressman, senator. You needed political. There's only a political solution to that particular problem, and to many of these other ones, and that's really not the space that I think big foundations and donors in the philanthropy world should be getting into, because there's all kinds of stuff being completely unaddressed that we can't. That there's more than enough work for
Yeah,
philanthropy to get
I
addressed.
agree. No, I totally agree.
Do you feel that donors, especially those making significant gifts, how much of a responsibility do they have to become experts on the issue that they're funding?
I still see it as a drive. I mean, that they want to know about the issue so that they can invest philanthropically, smartly. I see that more from institutional. Individual donors, I see it a little less, but I think that I sometimes see a desire that they wish they knew more. I mean, I think it's, without opening a gigantic can of worms, those who use donor advised funds or things like that, where they basically say, I'm going to put this in here, but I'm going to, seed the thinking about which organizations to support sort of to someone else. Um, but I do think there's a
Many
there's
people
a
do that.
middle ground in there somewhere. I mean, I do think that if you're going to fund youth mental health, you should, spend a couple of minutes on figuring out, educating yourself a little bit about it, but also, though, as part of that, to build the connections with those nonprofits that are doing the work, or the community, so that, again, it's not knowledge and then you're imposing things onto the nonprofits or onto the sector. You're learning out of a place of, we want to work with everyone. That's where I'm starting to see it happening. I mean, Exponent Philanthropy calls it catalytic philanthropy, but it's funders that are going into the communities to learn what the community need directly from the members of the community, so that they're making, again, it's a whole different level of being informed about where philanthropy needs to be positioning itself, that it really is actually going to make an impact. And that's comes from learning, but it takes getting out of the office and getting into the communities, so that they can learn. So
So I think there's a lot of donors that are interested and excited to do the extra work there, right? And put a lot of their time. There's talk about the 5 T's, right? There's time, talent, treasure, ties, and testimony.
Yes, there we go. Yeah.
Right, and those are the 5 things supposedly you can
Yeah.
go. This is people interested in doing making some ties and putting their time in and learning, getting deep into the issue, which might very well be catalytic, right? I do think there's a not insignificant number of donors, right? That maybe they're retired and they want to basically enjoy their retirement. They also have a lot of extra wealth, so they want to spend a very small amount of time every year choosing some organizations to donate to so they can get a little tax benefit and enjoy it. And these people aren't, and I don't think this is necessarily bad. They don't want to make it a job or a hobby. Right? And so this is why I think this is one of my only defenses of like donor advised funds, right? Because you could go set one up and ask the people there, tell them like, I generally care about this, this, and this, and please make sure I'm meeting my right. And you don't need to keep me updated or anything. And that would be a really great way for that person to give, right? And I think that's actually happening a lot, right?
It is. It is.
Go to your local community foundation. Before DAFs existed, you could go to your
Yeah.
community foundation and do this. That's probably the best way to.
And they're still doing it.
Every state, the main community foundation is great. The North Carolina,
Yeah, no, I mean,
you're all got them. They all tend to know their community. They're going to have folks that are hopefully have either folks who are experts or access to experts on these issues, so they can be doing this sort of stuff. And then you don't have a lot of experts, right? Talking about right and going back and forth.
So I do think that there's a chance for them to know when I do talk to families or individuals, and where they may or may not want to be experts, they don't, when they realize they don't know what they don't know, and they realize just how complex the nonprofit sector is. So, someone says, okay, we want to help homelessness. Okay, great. Did you know that there are a lot of ways you could do it? Did you want to hand out sandwiches? That's great. Or did you want to work on policies so that people don't even become homeless? That's right. I could go both ways. One way, do you want to involve your kids? Well, maybe the sandwiches thing is something that the kids can do with you, but big impact, you can go work at a policy level. And is where I start to see eyes light up in individuals where I go, oh, that's right. There are a lot of different ways I could go that will all get what I want to see happen. I want to fix homelessness, or I want to help, food insecurity, or whatever happens to be. That's when I see
this topic, because there are a lot of people who think they know how to solve homelessness.
So it's interesting to see people beginning.
And many of them, their solution, thank God they are not grant makers, because their solutions would not be right. You see today, this is actually a conversation that's been happening in America in philanthropy for as long as we've had professional philanthropists. Some of the very first professional philanthropists were talking about pauperism, all giving alms as opposed to supporting organizations and programs, right? And actually, we got at one point in history where, all right, pauperism isn't real. We don't need to worry about that anymore. And then, but we yet still have people very, very who think that the solution to you just need to teach a man how to fish, right? Can't give him a fish. We've read many complicated grant proposals from very good organizations serving the homeless. So I happen to know what I don't know here, and I also know it's not something I don't necessarily think that at the moment it's something that money solves. Some of these issues are intractable despite how much money we throw at them, because money doesn't, this has been a common theme of this conversation, right? There are ways to solve things even in the world of grant making. There's things that you have to do that aren't just giving money to the thing in order to really make that grant have an impact. Unfunded has been around for 9.5 years now, and in that time I've seen many organizations get funded, spend all that funding, and now they don't, and some of them don't exist anymore. I've never been given a particularly enormous grant. Sort of we haven't gotten a call from any billionaires, right? Nothing that's going to make the Today Show, right? But we're still here, still able to have enormous impact. And I'm not sure if someone came along and gave me $1 million right now, that would necessarily be a good thing for what we do. This is one of the reasons why I really like working in this sector. It's not a simply quantified thing. Same with the arts, right? You can spend a lot of money making a movie or doing a show, right? It's not going to make it good
Yeah.
necessarily.
True.
Some of the most expensive projects in history were terrible, and some of the most like revered films ever made were made on very low budgets. Like the that's I, again
Yeah.
I would hate to work in a field where the amount of money you put into it is the only possible input that we
Impact. Yeah.
have.
It's I mean, and the not, and again, not to say there is no role for large amounts of money, but again, I think that it is more than just about it is more than just about the money. It is about how do you talk about the impact and how do we describe what we're looking at when we're trying to, you know, and I think it is important that, nonprofits, who can identify what it will take to solve some of these problems or solve large chunks of it, are in a position to when things like the giant, billionaire S's, gifts come in, that they are ready to activate it because they have thought about, okay, if we really are actually going to solve X, it's going to take Y, and that could say they could say that, and all of a sudden they had Y walk in the door. They can make it happen, but it is it is definitely it's about more than just it is about more than just the check alone just doesn't have to. There has to be a vision. There has to be.
Even in a field that is primarily known for distributing checks.
Mhm.
Like and that's it's very interesting. Very interesting to talk to you about your work as a philanthropy consultant. I as a one of the things that has been neat this season is folks who are professional giving advisors do seem to want to connect with each other. But we've had several of our previous guests. I think are actually pretty interesting. Some of them specifically want to talk to you. You sent out a update on what you're working on. You have your own newsletter or something, which I forwarded to the other guests. And so you're joining the fraternity of people who've been on season 5 of Open Door Philanthropy. Welcome.
I'm all about that. I'm all about the networking.
Hey, no, and you've already helped me out. You are a member of the National Network of Consultants to Grant Makers.
Correct. Yeah.
I'm going to be speaking to them next week, and hopefully we'll get some more interviews out of this network. You are a member. You're not just a member. You have some sort of leadership position.
I am their resource development council, so I am a member, but I'm also helping them to build their non-dues revenue.
Non-dues revenue. Oh, okay.
Because they're sponsorships, grants.
Sure. Very cool.
Things like that. So
why does one join the National Network of Consultants to Grant Makers?
It's a great collegial network where we both learn from each other and share best practices. Our goal is to make sure that we are prepared to provide our clients with the best possible services, where we're fully up to date and informed on the latest trends and issues in philanthropy and philanthropic practice. And again, we also sort of mutually support each other in this. Again, it's a very collegial, very open network, and it's great, especially for those of us who are independents. It's great to have other people that you can reach out to and say, hey, I'm looking at this issue, who else has wrestled with this issue, and things like that. But I do think it is opportunities for, again, it's networking as well as training and education. I mean, we do regular webinars where we have guest speakers talk about things, especially some of the current issues like coaching through challenging conversations, especially around diversity and equity and things like that. So it's been a great group to be part of, and our members are working with funders of all shapes and sizes all across the country, and our members are big firms as well as independents. So it's a wonderful diversity of people in this field, wrestling with these and dealing with big issues and helping our clients to make good giving decisions and do effective philanthropy. So it's a great place to be. So
thank you. You've already connected me with some folks there over email, and hopefully we'll be interviewing some of your fellow members.
Awesome. That'd be great.
Also, as you know, next in less than a month, you'll be receiving assignments.
Yep.
To review. We will have many from the global south, but we have a decent amount. We already have like 15 in, and we have some from the U.S. as well. Sure. I'll do my best to give you stuff that I think is a really good fit, and the the authors assigned to you will be fortunate indeed to hear.
I appreciate it. I have enjoyed it, and I learned a lot, which I learn as much as I hope to share information back out with folks. So no,
I always learn a ton,
yeah.
and I'm hearing that often. And I've read all the proposals, and I think if I ever say anything that sounds smart, I'm probably just repeating something that I read in one of the grant proposals or that one of the evaluators wrote.
All good. All good.
I remembered it and recognized.
Yeah, no, I know a lot about a lot of things.
My intelligence is more of a like puzzle making type of intelligence, rather than a like make the puzzle in the first place type. And as somebody who primarily copies and pastes at work, it's perfect. So I look forward to copying and pasting your comments into a report. I'm just kidding. Actually, our software does it for me automatically. I'm working myself out of a job over here. It gives me more time to do podcast interviews with folks like you. This has been Open Door Philanthropy, the Giving Advisor season with Marshall Ginn. And we've really enjoyed speaking with you, Marshall. We're going to let you finish up by talking about what you are most excited about when it comes to philanthropy.
I think I am most excited about the fact that funders and nonprofits are having much more frank conversations about what it takes to run effective organizations and how funders are going about the business, and that it is a business. But it's exciting to see those conversations happening at a rate that that wasn't happening 5 and 10 years ago. So that's exciting for me, is to have
candor. So you're excited about candor in the sector.
Yes. Little bit of candor goes a long way. Again, but everyone, we're in it to affect and support our communities. I mean, it's on, it all comes down to it. We have a shared goal of transforming the world, whether we're raising money for it, spending money to affect it, or facilitating that process. I think that, if we can remind ourselves that that's our shared goal, then I think a lot of great stuff is going to continue to happen. So
yeah, I agree.
Awesome.
By now, David Jaffe has started the closing music.
Okay. And it is fantastic.
Slowly, our voices will get quieter and quieter and quieter as the episode comes to an end. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you, David. That's probably the end. Probably ended right just a couple seconds before.
No, listen. Oh no, I think okay. I probably ought to be quiet.
Honestly, they're long interviews, so sometimes coming to like a good clean end is actually kind of hard because we're both tired and we just sort of stop talking at one point. That one was good. I had prepared. I practiced that.
Good. No, I appreciate it. Good. Well done.
David,
I'm sorry we had the little technology glitch. I think we rode through that one fine. We'll
I don't think it'll be. David will make it seem like it didn't happen. I don't know if he's there listening. He's at his actual job.
Okay.
He works from home. That's what's early for him over there in Hollywood. But yeah, I'm sure. I imagine the recording went well.
No, it's fine. No, this is great fun.
But it probably went well. We'll get that thing fixed up and probably put this one up pretty soon. I think I'm going to put this up before the submission deadline and be like, Marshall is one of the evaluators. Send a proposal, and he'll be one of your reviewers. You can listen to him talk for
an hour and
a half there. No, it's good. A piece of feedback I get 2 pieces of it, right? I get both sides. Lots of people tell me the episodes are too long. I don't want to listen. I'm like, all right, cool. And then I get like from a lot of people, like, I love that your episodes are very long because a lot of the other podcast episodes are really short and terse. And I like that you go in depth on the topics. So I'm hearing literally like,
you can't forget this. I like an audience for everything.
The second group is I tend to like them more than that first group. So. And there's many other philanthropy podcasts now, usually run by consultants, and they're just commercials for both consultants who are talking about their firm, and that's fine. That can exist. That can probably help. It probably helps.
I do like. I think they're still doing it. Exponent used to do the Catalytic Philanthropy podcast, and those actually were very interesting because it was basically a funder. I've had friends of mine who are funders that just they talk about what they're up to and what they're doing and things they're exploring. That one I've heard. I mean, I try to keep up between podcasts.
I need to. That's a good idea. I should get in touch with all of them. I was once on the like speaking circuit as a like next gen philanthropist.
Mhm.
It all stopped with COVID. I haven't gotten a call ever since then. But
Yeah, I'm trying to reactivate I mean, I do a lot of speaking and webinars. I'm trying to kind of get back out there.
what's
Speaking things
part of
like
the problem is it's not a speak. It's not the same. It's they don't do it that way anymore. They have a podcast and it's about being their podcast. It's not the same thing anymore. So I don't know like who to. It's not the same people. And I have my own podcast. So why would I go? I don't know why I would go on somebody else's.
who knows?
They should come. Like who would go on whose podcast?
There you go. All right. Well, listen, I'm going to scoot and respond to the pile of emails, and then I got actually a real life in-person networking meeting out of the house. So
Oh, very excited.
always
I'm going to the bank.
Yay!